My boss looked me in the eye, smiled that thin smile he always saved for me, and said, "You're nobody here." He said it in front of 20 people, with the projector humming, the coffee still steaming, and the CEO sitting 3 chairs down. I can still hear the way the words echoed. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He delivered it soft, like a joke. And the worst part was that everyone chuckled politely and then stared down at their laptops. My throat dried out instantly. I gripped the cap of my pen so hard it clicked twice. My face burned, but my body froze, like if I didn't move, maybe no one would notice how much it stung. But you always notice. You always notice when a room has just been told you don't matter. The meeting was one of those cross-functional strategy sessions where every department sent a representative. Finance had their spreadsheets printed and tabbed. Sales had their colored graphs. Marketing had slides polished to within an inch of their lives. And then there was me, the quiet data analyst, who everyone knew only as the person who cleans things up at the last minute. I wasn't on the agenda. I never was. My boss made sure of that. He'd been chipping away at me for months, cutting my name out of decks, reassigning credit, smiling when someone complimented his framework, knowing full well I'd built it. He thrived on that silent theft. And me? I told myself to keep my head down, that the work would speak eventually. I didn't realize the speaking would come from someone else's mouth. So when the conversation turned to risk assessment in the new pilot program, I dared to raise my hand. Just a sentence, a suggestion that would have saved us 6 weeks of duplicated effort. My boss didn't let me finish. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled like some kind of TV villain, and cut me off with those 3 words, "You're nobody here." The silence that followed was worse than laughter. One of the finance guys coughed. A woman from compliance shifted in her seat. Someone actually closed their laptop a little louder than necessary, like noise might break the tension. And then, as if to prove my boss right, the conversation carried on without me. My words evaporated, my existence folded back into the background hum of the projector. Except, not quite. The CEO, who had been half scrolling through his phone, half watching the slides, suddenly looked up. "Wait," he said, casual, like he was asking about the weather. "What's her last name again?" He was looking at me. For a split second, I didn't answer. My boss jumped in. "It doesn't matter. She's still in training. Just support staff." He said it like I wasn't even in the room, like I was a chair he could explain away. My hands trembled under the table. My tongue felt like it weighed 100 pounds. But I managed to say it clearly. "It's Carter. Flynn Carter." The CEO nodded, muttered something like, and then his thumb started moving. He was Googling me. Right there. In front of everyone. In front of the man who had just called me nobody. And I'll never forget the exact second it shifted. The moment his brows furrowed, then rose, like he'd just stumbled on something he hadn't expected. His lips pressed together. He scrolled again. And again. My boss noticed, leaned forward a little, trying to peek at the screen. The CEO angled it away. I sat there, wet palms pressed against my notebook, heart pounding so loud I swore the whole room could hear it. My mind raced. What was he seeing? The blog post I'd written at 2 a.m. that got shared across LinkedIn? The open source tool I'd uploaded to GitHub with my initials still stamped across every commit? The podcast clip where I'd explained a framework regulators later adopted? Or the case study from a Fortune 500 company that had used my method to cut losses last quarter? Whatever it was enough to make the CEO stop mid-sentence. The projector light flickered across his face as he glanced up, directly at me, not past me, not through me, at me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My boss fumbled with his notes, tapping his pen too fast. A couple of people glanced between us, confused. Something had cracked in the room and everyone could feel it. I wasn't hired to be visible. I was hired to make other people's slides make sense. That's the truth of it. My official title was analyst, which in corporate language means fix the numbers, smooth the charts, quietly glue together the pieces other people break. If the PowerPoint looked clean, my boss got the credit. If it didn't, well, nobody remembered my name anyway. I didn't start out bitter. I believed in the work. I loved systems, loved taking a mess of half-broken spreadsheets and coded chaos and finding a rhythm in it. There's a satisfaction in pulling signal from noise. Nights when everyone else went home, I'd stay. Fingers cramped, eyes dry, headphones buzzing low while I cleaned data sets until they actually told the truth. I'd leave long after the janitors, the hum of the vending machines my only applause. But something happened the year before that meeting. A project deadline slipped. My boss was gone for vacation, unreachable. I was the only one who had touched the raw files. We were hours from losing a client contract. So I did what I had to. I built a framework, not fancy, not academic, just a clean, practical method for mapping risk inputs so executives could see, in plain English, where the gaps were. No buzzwords, no jargon, just clarity. I posted the outline on my personal blog at 2 a.m., half to document it for myself, half because I thought maybe someone out there might find it useful. Someone did, then another, then another. Within weeks, people I had never met. Auditors in London, compliance leads in Singapore, consultants in New York were sharing it, linking it, translating it. It was surreal. A conference speaker cited it. A podcast host read a passage out loud. My email started filling with messages that began, "Are you the Evelyn Carter who wrote?" And because I was me, because I didn't know how else to operate, I gave it away. I uploaded the templates to GitHub. I built a tiny open source tool called Clean Room so people could run it themselves. No paywall, no license fee, just MIT licensed code with my initials in every comment. At first, it felt like throwing paper planes into the dark. Then one morning, I woke up and saw that Clean Room had been starred over 4,000 times. Fortune 500 companies were forking it. Regulators had bookmarked it. It had a life of its own. Meanwhile, inside my own company, I was still nobody. My boss discovered the tool, of course he did, and folded it quietly into an internal deck. Erased the link. Rebranded the slides. I saw my own diagrams, stripped of attribution, flashing on the projector in meetings where I wasn't invited. I'd hear him say phrases I'd written word for word in my blog posts. He was smart enough to never admit the source. He just let people assume. And why wouldn't they? I was quiet, invisible, useful. I tried to push back once. Just once. In a draft deck, I left my name in the footer of a framework diagram. The version that went to the executive committee had the diagram intact, but the name gone. A week later, I got pulled aside for feedback about being too concerned with credit. I was told, in that slow, paternal tone, the team wins together. Individual recognition is selfish. The irony of him saying that with my work under his arm still stings. So I learned the lesson. Keep receipts. Every email, every timestamp, every commit log. Not because I thought I'd ever use them. Honestly, I thought they'd just sit on a hard drive forever. But because some small, stubborn part of me knew, one day truth matters. Fast forward to that meeting. The pilot program on the table? It leaned heavily on the very framework I'd released, the one my boss had stripped of my name, the one clients outside the building already knew as mine. And while he dismissed me as nobody, I knew, deep down, even as my throat closed and my hands shook, that the ground under his feet wasn't nearly as solid as he thought. So when the CEO started typing my name into Google, I wasn't just a trembling analyst hoping for mercy. I was a woman sitting on a paper trail a mile long, with strangers across the industry already carrying my flag without even knowing me. The room didn't know it yet. My boss definitely didn't. But in that moment, I felt the balance tilt. Just a fraction. Like gravity had shifted. And if you think it already sounds messy, wait until you hear exactly what the CEO saw when those search results came up. Here's what the CEO saw in 0.42 seconds. That's how long it takes Google to change the temperature of an entire room. One moment my boss was in control, his words echoing like a stamp of authority. The next, the glow of a phone screen pulled the spotlight away, and suddenly it wasn't his stage anymore. First result, my blog. The one with the plain black header and white text I never bothered to dress up. The top article, risk mapping for the real world. Underneath, a share count in the tens of thousands. The snippet showed my name in bold letters, repeated again and again as commenters cited the Carter framework. Second result, GitHub. Clean Room by E. Carter. Starred over 4,000 times, forked hundreds more. A green contribution graph that looked like a forest. Commit logs with my initials on every line. Under the description, the words, open source risk analysis tool used by Fortune 500 companies. I hadn't written that tagline. Other people had. Third result, a PDF from the International Risk and Audit Conference. Session title, Applying the Carter Framework in Multinational Contexts. My slides, my diagrams, my name printed in the corner of every page. I wasn't even at that conference. Someone else had presented my work with credit intact. And then, a podcast transcript. A host introducing me as Evelyn Carter, the analyst behind the open framework regulators are buzzing about. My voice captured in clean audio, explaining why transparency mattered. Attribution isn't ego, I'd said months earlier. It's accountability. The CEO scrolled. His brows rose higher with every swipe. He wasn't subtle. He wasn't trying to be. He looked like a man who just discovered a gold vein running under his own floorboards. Meanwhile, my boss fidgeted. His pen tapped against his notepad like a drum. He leaned slightly, trying to angle a look at the screen. It's common knowledge, he stammered. Everyone in the field has seen those frameworks. Nothing new. His voice cracked on new. That was when the CFO, who had been half asleep until then, suddenly spoke up. Wait, clean room? That's her? We've been looking at vendors to integrate that exact tool. His words landed like stones in water. Heads turned. Even compliance perked up. Yeah, another voice chimed in. Our regulator referenced it last quarter. It's already in the guidelines. My boss's face flushed red, then pale. He tried to interrupt, but the CEO lifted a finger. Silence fell. The CEO set his phone down on the table, leaned back, and looked directly at me. Not around me, not past me, at me. Evelyn, he said slowly, would you mind walking us through how this pilot program uses, what did you call it, clean room? The entire room tilted in that instant. My pulse roared in my ears. My boss opened his mouth, but the CEO didn't even glance at him. His gaze was fixed on me, steady and expectant, like I was suddenly the only person in the building with the answer. Which ironically was true. I swallowed. My palms were damp against the cover of my notebook. My voice wanted to catch in my throat, but I forced it out, calm, even. Of course, I said. The framework you're using is built to surface gaps across cross-border compliance environments. Clean Room automates that by running simulations against overlapping jurisdictions. That's why you've been able to cut down turnaround time from 6 weeks to 2. The pilot results you're reviewing today, they're only possible because of that methodology. The air in the room changed. A collective intake of breath, subtle but unmistakable. People shifted in their seats, not because they doubted me, but because they realized they'd just been sitting on the source the entire time. My boss shuffled his papers, tried to laugh. Well, she just helps with drafts, he muttered. Nobody laughed with him. The CEO's lips curved into something between a smirk and a smile. He tapped his pen against the table once. Sharp. Interesting, he said. Very interesting. And then, without looking at my boss, Evelyn, I want a full walkthrough on my desk tomorrow. Don't sanitize it. I want the real version. That was it. A single sentence. But it carried the weight of a shift years in the making. For the first time, the invisible walls I'd been pressed against started to crack. I didn't let myself smile. Not yet. My face stayed neutral, professional, calm. But inside I could feel something unfurl like a hand that had been clenched too tight finally opening. And if you think the Google moment was the peak, no. That was just the beginning. Because what came next wasn't just vindication, it was fallout. And fallout is never quiet. If you've ever wanted to see karma unfold in real time, like this, so the algorithm doesn't bury part 4, the receipts are coming and they are brutal. Turns out nobody keeps immaculate receipts. That's what I thought, sitting at my desk that night, pulling up folders I'd been quietly maintaining for months. Every email, every draft, every slide version with my name cropped out, every calendar invite where I'd been scheduled, then mysteriously removed 5 minutes before showtime. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. My boss thought invisibility meant weakness. He never considered that invisible people see everything. The CEO had asked for a full walkthrough, unsanitized, so I gave him one. I stayed past midnight, piecing together a package that told the story clean and undeniable. Time-stamped commits on GitHub, the blog post with a publication date predating any internal document, screenshots of my diagrams circulating in client-facing decks, minus attribution. I even had an email where I gently suggested we cite the open source license, and my boss had replied, "No need, nobody reads those." He couldn't have written me a better gift. By morning, the dossier was ready. I sent it straight to the CEO's office, CCing HR and legal. No commentary, no editorializing, just facts, lined up like dominoes. I braced for silence. Instead, my phone rang before 10 a.m. "Conference room 14B, said a clipped voice. HR. When I walked in, the air was thick. The CEO was at the head of the table. HR director to his left. Legal counsel to his right. My boss sat 2 chairs down, papers trembling slightly in his hands. His face was pale, blotchy at the edges. For the first time since I'd known him, he wasn't smirking. He looked cornered. The CEO nodded at me. "Evelyn, sit." His tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't dismissive either. It was the tone you use for someone you're finally taking seriously. HR began. "We've reviewed the materials. They're extensive." She flipped through the folder like it was radioactive. "There are clear concerns around attribution, compliance, and misrepresentation." Legal chimed in, tapping one finger on a page. "The issue isn't just credit. The framework is licensed. Stripping attribution creates exposure. If a regulator were to notice—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The risk hung in the room like static. My boss tried to interrupt. "Look, this is overblown. Everyone borrows ideas." The CEO's hand cut through the air. Sharp. Final. "Enough." He turned to me. "Is it true that the clients have already referenced this framework publicly under your name?" "Yes," I said, steady. "2 of them. I can provide links." The CFO, who had slipped in quietly, spoke up. "One of those clients called this morning. They asked if the Carter framework was officially part of our pilot. They want Evelyn on the next call." You could hear the blood drain from my boss's face. The CEO leaned back. His eyes scanned the room, then landed on HR. "We'll handle the compliance risk. Effective immediately. Evelyn reports directly to me. Pending review, she'll oversee integration of cleanroom across the pilot." HR scribbled notes. Legal nodded. The decision was sealed in less than 2 minutes. My boss opened his mouth, closed it, then muttered something about misunderstanding. Nobody responded. He was already invisible. But the real shift wasn't the reporting line. It was the silence after. The unspoken acknowledgement that power had moved, that the person who had been called nobody 24 hours earlier now carried the weight of client trust, legal exposure, and executive attention. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just sat there, spine straight, letting the silence hold. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the folder one last time. I read through every email, every note, every receipt. For the first time, I didn't feel like evidence was just protection. It was vindication. Proof that quiet work matters. Proof that truth doesn't disappear, even if someone tries to bury it under their own name. And here's the thing. Fallout wasn't done. This wasn't just about recognition. Karma doesn't knock once. It pounds. Stick with me, because in part 5, you'll see exactly how karma unraveled my boss's career, thread by thread. Karma isn't loud, it's procedural. That's what I learned watching my boss come apart piece by piece. Not in an explosion, but in slow, surgical cuts. The first cut came from internal audit. They pulled email chains, project logs, and attribution trails. What surfaced wasn't just my work stripped of credit, it was a pattern. Metrics inflated to make his initiatives look better. Meeting notes rewritten to erase other contributors. Training requests denied with flimsy excuses. Even worse, compliance documents altered to downplay licensing obligations. To audit, this wasn't just politics. It was negligence, a risk. The second cut came from HR. Testimonies started trickling in. Analysts who'd quietly suffered under him spoke up once they realized the tide had shifted. Stories poured out, projects reassigned without explanation, opportunities blocked, credit stolen. A picture formed of a man who'd built his entire career on silencing others. HR didn't like that picture. Neither did legal. The third cut came from clients. 2 marquee accounts, both in regulated industries, reached out directly to the CEO's office. They didn't want my boss on calls anymore. They wanted me, by name. We've been referencing the Carter framework in our reports, one client wrote. We'd prefer to hear from the source. The CEO didn't argue. Neither did sales. In one email, my boss's relevance shrank to 0. By the end of the week, he wasn't leading meetings. He wasn't even CC'd. His title still existed on paper, but functionally he'd been airbrushed out. Suspended pending investigation, then quietly moved to advisory. Everyone knew what that meant. No power, no voice, no path back. And me? For the first time, I had leverage. Real leverage. Not just recognition, but proof, clients, and executive backing. So I used it. I drafted a remediation plan, not for myself, but for the company. A clean set of steps. Public attribution restored on every document, every deck, every client-facing slide. A permanent authorship registry to prevent silent erasure. Integration of clean room into core risk processes with mandatory training across teams. A governance policy stating attribution is not optional. It's a control, as critical as versioning or audit logs. And at the bottom, one condition: I would lead it. Not as a middle manager buried under someone else, but as head of a new unit, risk engineering, with a direct line to the CEO. I expected resistance. Instead, the CEO nodded. Draft it formally, he said. We'll take it to the board. That was the moment it crystallized for me. Revenge isn't always a spectacle. Sometimes it's a document on letterhead, signed by people who used to ignore you. Sometimes karma wears a suit. I walked out of that room calm, collected, not triumphant, but steady. My boss, the one who'd called me nobody, was left sitting in silence, his eyes fixed on the table, as if staring long enough might erase the reality he couldn't control. And here's the thing. I didn't ask for money first. I didn't ask for perks. I asked for governance. Because money spends, perks fade, but governance lasts. Governance rewrites the rules so nobody else has to fight the same battle alone. But it wasn't over. There was one final act left, the apology, the offer, and my choice. And trust me, that's where the satisfaction peaks. If you've followed me this far, you'll want to see part 6. It's not just revenge, it's reform. They offered me the title I used to want. I asked for something else. That's how it ended. Not with a trophy, not with applause, but with a choice. 2 weeks after my boss was quietly transitioned, I was summoned to the executive floor. The carpet was thicker there, the air quieter. The assistant at the front desk smiled in a way that said, "You belong now." Inside the glass-walled conference room, the CEO sat with 2 board members. My remediation plan was projected on the screen. Every bullet point I'd written was highlighted in green. It wasn't a proposal anymore. It was an agenda. The CEO started. Evelyn, first, an apology. Public recognition has been overdue. That ends now. He didn't flinch, didn't sugarcoat. We failed you, and we failed the company by ignoring your contributions. You built something vital, and you were denied the credit. That's unacceptable. Oh, for a moment, I didn't speak. I just let the words hang there. After years of being erased, hearing someone in authority say we failed you was heavier than I expected. My throat tightened. I nodded. Thank you. Then came the offer. We want you to lead risk engineering as a new division. Title, Director. Full budget authority. Your framework becomes standard policy across the enterprise. He paused. We're prepared to adjust compensation accordingly. Once that would have been everything I wanted. Title, budget, authority, validation. But sitting there with the city skyline reflecting off the glass, I realized something. Power given can also be taken. Titles are just labels on doors someone else owns. I wanted more than a door. I wanted the foundation. So I asked for something different. Option A. Establish risk engineering as an independent guild inside the company, with board-level oversight and protections for authorship. No one, not a manager, not even an executive, could strip attribution again. Option B. If they couldn't guarantee that, I would spin out Clean Room as a partnered lab. Independent, with revenue share. They could license it. I would own it. The room went quiet. One board member leaned forward, intrigued. The other frowned, calculating. The CEO studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. We'll take option A to the board. And just like that, the rules changed. Not just for me, for anyone who'd ever been erased. Governance wasn't a dream anymore. It was policy. A week later, the announcement went out. Risk Engineering Guild established under the office of the CEO. Evelyn Carter appointed head of guild. Emails poured in, some congratulatory, some stunned. A few from strangers in the industry saying simply, "Thank you for making space for us." And my old boss? He's still around technically. He shuffles past me sometimes in the hallway, no longer smirking, no longer talking over anyone. The last time I saw him, he slowed outside the glass-walled training room, where my team was running a module titled Attribution is a Control. He didn't step inside. He just stood there, silent, watching until he walked away. That's the image I keep, not revenge and fire and fury, not triumph on a pedestal, just quiet reform, visible through glass, while the man who called me nobody stands on the outside, looking in. Because here's the truth. Work doesn't need to be loud to matter. Recognition doesn't always come on time. But when it does, it's stronger than the noise that tried to bury it. And if you've ever been dismissed, silenced, or told you were nobody, remember this. The work survives. The truth survives. And sometimes, if you keep your receipts and hold your ground, the system itself bends toward it. So yeah, they offered me the title I used to want, but I didn't need it anymore. I had something better. I had the rules rewritten. If this story hit you, even a little, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read every one.